Another edition here of Getting There with Goz, where we talk about the career journeys of athletes, coaches, media members, business owners, and more with those upstate New York connections. Even though she may not be an upstate New York native, which we'll get to in a second, she definitely has some upstate New York roots. Liana Bonavita joins us. Liana, for those who might not know you, let's go back to a younger version of you, 6, 7, 8 years old. Where'd you grow up? What'd you want to be as a kid? And was it that same dream job you wanted when you were 18 years old?
Sure. So when I grew up, I was in New Hampshire. So southern New Hampshire, right over the Massachusetts border, but still pretty close to the ocean, 45 minutes away from the ocean. So, and then about 40 minutes away from Boston. So kind of a suburb of Boston to some degree, even though I was in New Hampshire. And so that's where I grew up. And what did I want to be when I grew up? I wanted to be all kinds of things. I wanted to be an author at one point. I wanted to be a lawyer at one point. I wanted to be a teacher at one point. None of those things came true. Maybe author to some degree, becoming a journalist, but it really wasn't until later in life that I figured out what it was that I wanted to do. And then when I figured it out, I went straight forward, all guns blazing.
All right, so let's talk about it. You make the decision, college in the future when you're 18 years old, 17, depending on how old you are. You graduate, take us through the college process. Did you know by that point what that career goal was? I see Sarah audio on and she's shaking her head. The answer is no, by the way. Why did that's right. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone has those conversations, right? Where it seems like all of your aunts and uncles and their friends and your friends' parents and your friends are asking you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what are you going to go to school for? And at the time, I had no idea. And so I was, a snotty little kid, and I was getting a little moody with an uncle of mine who finally presented the question in a way that was very simple, but unlike any that I had heard before. And he just said, well, what don't you want to do? And so it made me immediately less defensive. And I said, well, I guess I don't want to be a doctor or a lawyer, which I had wanted to be at one point. And, I listed off a couple things, and he said, all right. He said, well, what do you like? And I said, what do you mean? What do I like? He said, Liana, what do you like? Like, this isn't a trick question. And I was like, well, okay, fine. Well, I like sports, and I like stories, and I like talking to people. And he said, okay, that sounds a bit like the communications field. He said, so you want to do every day something that you enjoy. So think about it. What you like, with that in mind, what might you want to do when you grow up? And he's like, and I don't care. It can be the president of the United States. You can want to go walk on the moon. I don't care. What is it that you want to be? Don't be afraid to tell me. So I was thinking about it, and I said, I guess I'd want to be a sports reporter. He said, fine, then go do it. And so right after that was my junior year of high school. I entered a summer college program at Syracuse University just to figure out if the communications route was something that I would even enjoy. So like, here I am thinking that I would like this, but whether practically, if I went and started taking some of these classes, whether it would be something that I would actually like. And it was an awesome summer. I loved my classes, journalism and communicate, all of it. I thought it was awesome. And so I was really intrigued. I got bit by the bug. And so when I was applying for colleges, I was really lucky. I knew exactly what it is that I wanted to do. So I was able to apply to schools that had good journalism programs, that were my other thing that I needed was a good Division I big sports school, because I wanted that experience. I wanted to be able to maybe cover that, but it was really more just about experiencing that, because I had always watched it on TV. So with all of that said, I ended up going to the University of Southern California. I almost went to Syracuse. Do you know this story, Gus?
I know a little bit about it, but by the way, for those people who've listened to past episodes, you just like gave the payoff. It's like, wait, she's going to go to Newhouse. She's got the. You just took a quick turn for some people. Are like, wait a second.
Well,
she had the connection to Syracuse, right?
I almost did. My deposit was in. I almost went to Syracuse. So Syracuse was. I loved my time there so much that, and the teachers were great, and I felt like I was learning. That I felt like, well, it can't go wrong, right? I can't go wrong. And so my deposit was in. I was excited about it. The day that everyone was wearing sweatshirts in high school, I wore a bright orange Syracuse sweatshirt. Like I thought that was where I was going to go. And last minute, a couple things happened. One, I started thinking, well, college is supposed to be this grand, big new adventure. And is this something that I feel like I had already done before? You know, was it going to be that exciting thing for me, or did I feel like it was safe? So it felt a little safe. So I was battling that in my brain a little bit. At the same time, I got a phone call from a teacher or a professor, I guess, at Annenberg School of Journalism from USC, and he wasn't pushy, wasn't salesman-y. He just wanted to ask me about what it is that I was looking to get out of school, if I had any questions, the things that they provide and offer. And after that, like 45-minute conversation late one night, because, you know, it was 3 hours earlier in California. So I think it was like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. I got off the phone and I went into my parents' bedroom and I was like, guys, how do you feel about maybe me going to Los Angeles? And they were like, woohoo! Yes, go for it. They're like, such a better place to visit. So that was it.
Amazing. That is wild when you think about it. That the deposit's in, the orange is being worn to school, and the quick shift to the left coast to the University of Southern California. The fight on pops up and you become a Trojan. I don't want to date you at this point, but when you go to USC, it is truly, at least the last 25 to 30 years, a remarkable time that if you want to be a sports journalist, a sports anchor, you are right there at some of the great athletes you get to cover early in your career.
You can date me. I don't care, because it was awesome. So unfortunately for me, I never saw a national champion in football. However, that was right before me. However, my first year was Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, the year they lost to Texas in the national championship, which is still to this day one of the greatest games, I think, in college football. And, you know, at the end, it was devastating. However, that whole year was Reggie Bush's Heisman year. So that was really cool to get to go and cover. And even, I think, sliding in under the radar a bit outside of all the football teams that I got to cover, the basketball team at that time was actually okay. I don't remember exactly what year it was and what grade I was in, but one of my years, I want to say maybe my sophomore year, here I say we, you know, because like I'm on the team. So the team beat Texas, Kevin Durant's Texas, in the NCAA tournament and nearly made it to the Sweet 16 and just fell short to Tyler Hansborough's UNC at the time. They were beating them. So, I mean, it was a pretty cool run at the time where USC's basketball program wasn't the program, you know, football was. So
in your role as a student, are you able to go to these games? Are you working television? Are you doing a radio audio side? What is kind of your role, and how does it develop from your first year at USC to your senior year at USC?
I did all kinds of things. So outside of the journalism school, my work study job that I ultimately chose to do, because I need to work, I need to make money. And Los Angeles is one of the most expensive places. But I ended up, not like this job paid me a whole lot, but still, I was able to do so. I ended up working to do basically odds and ends jobs at various sporting events. So think about like the soccer game. I would go and like chase soccer balls that were kicked out of bounds. Or the basketball game, I would sit under the basket and like be the sweeper, like the broom person, to make sure all the sweat was off the floor. So I was like a random, I don't even know what they call that job, but it's just like a random sports person. So I got to be
promotions would be nice. Promotions would be like the nice way to put it, right?
Yes, that would be nice. But yeah, so I got to be front and center for a lot of those cool things just by working at them. And then step back to the journalism school. Yes, we were able to cover some of those events. Really, I could do outside of the major ones, right? So everybody wants to go to the football game, but they would only pick one crew of 4 to go to every game, every home game. So as you got older, you would become the reporter on that crew. When you're younger, you could potentially be the camera person, or we had multiple camera people, I think. So 2 camera people, 2 reporters. So one of those. So I got to go to several of the games for that and doing those kinds of roles. And then I could be a reporter as it went forward. But then also just within our own classes, the packages that we chose to put together, I put packages together on a lot of the athletes. There was this one girl who was a volleyball player who ended up having fibromyalgia and had a really hard time and had to sit out several games. So I did a story on her. We had a swimmer at the school at the time who competed in the Olympics. So I did a story on her. So it just lent itself to all kinds of really cool opportunities to do stories, even if they weren't the big time events that everybody considers and watches on TV. But we were able to be a part of those too. And the cool part is Pete Carroll was the coach at the time, and he was just so available to students. He was great. I took a sports business and media class that I still rave about to this day. And in that class, for the first hour, it's a big lecture. So for the first hour or so, it was learning about whatever the topic was of the day. But the second hour, they brought in a guest and would just chat about with that guest, ask questions. And those guests ranged from all kinds of people: Scott Boras, Keyshawn Johnson, Kobe Bryant's publicist, obviously Pete Carroll. We had all kinds of people that were in there, and it was really, really cool. Al Michaels went in there at one point. So being in Los Angeles at USC really afforded me all kinds of opportunities that I don't know if I would have gotten at another school. So it was a really good choice.
It is so different. California, the entertainment focus, the media focus at USC. One of my follow-up questions was going to be, what are the advantages going to a state like California, that area like Los Angeles, that's the entertainment capital of the world? You answered it for me, because you have Keyshawn Johnson and Al Michaels and everybody else showing up to class, which you can't teach. Like, you're just sitting there soaking up this knowledge and getting to work with these athletes and legendary coaches. It's something that, even though you're a teenager doing this, somebody in their mid 30s or early 40s, they would hope and dream to cover this. You get to do it so early in your career, which is so amazing. So as great as USC is, as wonderful as the time is, at some point they tell you have to leave campus because you're going to have to graduate and get an actual job they're going to pay you to do. So as much fun as you had out at USC, take us through the process when you're ready to graduate, looking for that first job, and where do you land your first professional job?
So half a step back, a huge part of that, as you know, is internships, and being in Los Angeles, to just kind of go off of what you were asking before, was really cool. I was able to intern at KNBC, but also at USC. And I know several other schools had this opportunity, but I don't think every single college. I was able to go intern at the Beijing Olympics, the Summer Olympics in 2008. So that was a really cool opportunity. They came to our campus and said, hey, we're looking for a handful of students, and we had to interview for it. And then only a certain amount of us were selected to actually go. So that was another really cool thing. So that also, you put on your resume, right? So you're going to try and get your first gig. And we put together a reel with the stories that we've put together from school, some of the stand-ups that we had, maybe some live shots that we put together from our campus television station, which obviously we're all part of. And then you just kind of send it out. And for me, right after college, I didn't go straight to work. I went to Europe for 6 weeks to do that whole Euro trip backpacking situation, which didn't really set myself up great to get a job, because now I am living back at home in New Hampshire, away from all of the ways that I can have editing equipment. We didn't have these that could do all of that at the time. So it was just whatever I had at my disposal through school. So I was no longer at school. I was at home. I had my one tape and my resume. And at this point, the longer we go, the more dated it's getting, right? So I ended up not getting my first job until the following year, August of 2010. I was a server. I catered at various events in that time as I was keeping the dream alive. And when I got my first job, it was in Binghamton. And that week, I actually had another phone interview with a station in Lubbock, Texas. So I had all of a sudden 2 irons in the fire when I had none previously, because you're just sending your stuff left and right, and hoping to get a call back, and I didn't. So, and I had a couple news directors, thankfully, that had reached back out to me with some suggestions on my reel, but at that point, there's nothing I could do about it. So take it or leave it. So I got my opportunity in Binghamton to work for WIVT there. And at the time, it was technically a part-time job. So it was a part-time job, no benefits, but I was the entire sports department. So that's what happens when you get your first job sometimes and you go to these really small markets. And I was thrilled. It was, my parents, I think, were like, oh my goodness, after all this money that you paid to go to school, that they paid, let's be honest, for me to go to school, they're paying off the student loans. I thank them all the time for that. They really put me in a good position to start off. I was making peanuts and, doing something that I loved. And so that was my first job, was in Binghamton, New York.
Let's go back a little bit, because I'm glad you've been so open and honest and candid about that struggle between graduation and that 15th month window. There are a lot of people, and I won't call them out on who was on previous episodes, that like to skip over that year and don't address that. Like, yeah, it's really hard to be a 22-year-old or 21-year-old that when you graduate and don't get a job and they feel embarrassed. I was in the same boat you were. And I know other people don't like to talk about it because that's the hardest time for so many people in their career. And unfortunately, what we've seen here when we're taping this in June of 2022, that year can be the ultimate year where so many people did this in college and never go back because they get so discouraged. Were you discouraged? Did you think like, okay, this is just never going to happen? What were your feelings like in that 15th month window between graduation and landing the Binghamton job?
That's a great question. I go back there all the time and I wonder how I wasn't more stressed. I think in my mind, failure just wasn't an option. I was just going to keep going until I got something. And in my mind, I don't think I ever made it to, well, it might not happen. So I don't know if that's just being young and naive. And I am glad for that, because it could have been a really terrible, scary time. I was also, keeping myself busy. I wasn't sitting on my hands doing nothing, watching TV. I did have a job. Had a boyfriend at the time that was keeping me busy. So, there were things that I was doing that I was occupying myself with, but it was not what I ultimately wanted to do, what I went to school for. And like I said, I'm one of those people who did a lot of this for myself, but also to make my parents proud. I think other authority figures, my teachers, and there's that aspect of, as you mentioned, failure of being embarrassed and not really being able to give myself or them that satisfaction. So I think in my mind, I was just like, oh no, that's just never going to happen. I have to do this. It will come. And once it comes, I know I'll take advantage of it. I just need to get my shot.
It's a great answer.
Funny. This is really fun because I don't want to skip over too much, but when I was leaving that first job, I found out through my news director at the time that, he hired me for reasons other than this, but he was fearful that I would miss out on another shot because of how much time had passed. So it was almost like he felt bad for me. And so I got hired for that. Whatever
That's right.
needed to happen. I got my foot in the door and made the most of it from there.
Hey, it worked. They put you in, they signed your paychecks. You don't have to ask questions after that. That's exactly right. You're in, you're in. All right. So you teased me, you set me up there a little bit about the next journey post Binghamton. Where is that next opportunity professionally? You were the one man or one woman band. I guess I feel like I might use that term again, by the way, in our conversation today. All right. Post Binghamton, what's the next stop for you?
Here, Albany. So through working in Binghamton, I worked with our sister station, which at the time was Fox 23 when it was separate of News 10 ABC. And so when they were two separate entities, I worked with sports director Rich Becker, because, you know this, but other people might not know this. When state tournaments and stuff like that happen, they happen all over the place. So when we have, parent companies that are the same and we can help each other out, send each other video, we would do that when we could. And so when Albany teams would play in Binghamton or vice versa, we would try and get each other some of those games. So I would work with them kind of at arm's length, but they knew who I was. I knew who they were. So when an opening came about in their sports department for, really, we call them a number 3 person. So not the sports director, not the weekend sports anchor, but kind of the reporter that helps out on all days. That when that job opened up, I wanted to snag it. I felt like I would be a really good fit, and I was one of several people, obviously, that applied for it. And I was lucky enough to be hired by, at that time, Rich Becker, who I just mentioned, who is still to this day an incredible mentor of mine and one of the best, I think, that's ever come through this business, and that, showed me how to lead and what it was to really run a good sports department. And unfortunately, he and I really only worked together for a short period of time. I really wanted to come to Albany to learn from people, because for so long, not so long, but the year plus that I was in Binghamton, I was it. I was doing it all. I was running the show, but it was my first job. So I wanted to come and learn from people that had been doing it for a lot longer. And Rich and Scott Morlock at the time, he was the weekend sports anchor, had been doing it for a long time. And I felt like they were such a strong team that I was really eager and excited to come and work with. And as it happens, Rich left pretty quickly, and then the station was sold. Well, Scott left shortly after that. The station was sold, and things went nuts. And soon after, I wasn't working for anybody, and it was me again. So then I just had to reinvent myself again. And luckily, I had, like I said, those couple months of a really strong example.
All right, let's backpedal a little bit, because first of all, shout out to Rich Becker. You and I both got love for Rich. Hopefully he gets a chance to listen to this, because you and I both big Rich Becker fans. I know time has passed now since this has happened, and you can feel nonchalant about those changes that happened in your career. Liana, that was insane. What happened? Like, when I hear this story from other people who have worked in media in Albany, and even like letting it sit in, is like, it's hard for me to grasp what happened to you a year basically into your job, where you're the number 3 is the term you used, to everybody's leaving and I'm running the show. Let's go back a little bit. Like, there had to be anxiety, fear. What the hell just happened? Because I just got put in a spot that I may or may not be ready for, but I have no choice to be ready at this point.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what it is. You just take it, because there's also another aspect of it too. While there's fear and anxiety, there's also, wow, I'm a sports director in a market that maybe I never thought that I would be at this stage of my career. So it's also a massive opportunity. And when you're chasing the dream of moving up markets and moving up jobs within those markets, it just happened for me a little bit quicker. But yeah, it was very fast. Rich left to, for a lot of the same reasons I recently did, and we'll get to that later, but, to be with his family. And then things just didn't work out with Scott, which I wish they did, but Fox hired somebody else to be the sports director at the time. And then when they came in and sold it, I could have lost my job. I mean, I was the only person within the Fox 23 sports department that maintained my job all the way until we got to News 10. And then I moved, and I was within a team of Drew Brill, and Josh Sims at the time, who they already had their own team at News 10. So I came back in as the number 3. By the way, I'd been the number 2. I'm back to the number 3. Here we are at News 10. And then Drew leaves, and now I'm the number 1 all of a sudden. And it just was kind of a crazy situation that, I mean, the way, looking back on things, how management handles things and how we handle things, a little bit is out of our control, and we just have to do the best with what hands were dealt. And I tried my best. And were there bumps along the way? Absolutely. Of course there is. There's learning on the job. And I did a lot of that. But the good news is I had the job for a while. So I was hopefully able to learn I don't want to say perfect. There's never any perfect, but at least, get it to where we were functioning at a really high level.
You busted your butt, Liana, is what happened. They started to recognize and be like, all right, she knows what she's doing. She's putting the effort in. She's there. I told you, like, when the first time I met you, I'm like, are you everywhere? Is there another Liana Bonavita that covers sports in Albany? Are there like 2 or 3 of you? You were, and I know coaches used to say that to you, like, you were at everything. And that kind of felt like your early entry to Albany and the Capital Region sports scene, where it felt like the first advice you gave yourself almost was, I need to be everywhere and do as much as we can to make this work.
Well, going back to that class that I had talked to you about, the sports business and media class, we had this one guy come in who was, I want to say, the programming director at ESPN. And his big topic of the day was like, what's your brand? Because a lot of people can do what you do. You're going to be graduating with, hundreds of people, and those hundreds of people are just one college. There's going to be hundreds of people elsewhere. So how do you differentiate yourself? And I remember struggling a lot with answering that question. Like, what makes me stand apart? Because the answer was always so simple. I just work really freaking hard. That's it. Like, that's who I am. I'm a grinder. And so it was hard for me to be like, is that really special? Because like a lot of people work hard, right? But I'm like, no, I actually think I outwork and out hustle. I put myself up against almost anyone. That's just what I do and who I am. So I think ultimately at the end of the day, that helped. But also, having the example of leading local, like hyper local, that's just what we wanted to do. We wanted to make our sports department something that highlighted Capital Region sports more than anything else. And yes, at times that means we left out some regional sports. We left out some national sports that maybe were big stories, but there were other stories here that you couldn't get on ESPN, that you couldn't get on, your phone. And so you could get it from us. And that's what we prioritized, or at least I prioritized. And in addition to telling really cool stories outside of the highlights and the games for that day, which were important, I really tried to seek out stories that moved me, because when they moved me and I felt like I could tell them in a way that could move someone else, it would be cool.
Finding those personalities, those stories, those moments in the Capital Region. Yeah, you feel those emotions with people. You mentioned growing up in New England. It almost seems at times I compare this Capital Region market to sometimes New England, because there's so many different fans and different fan bases and different backgrounds of people. Like one day you could be covering a Division I basketball game, and the other day you're covering horse racing, or you're covering a high school game, you're covering indoor football. It is truly all over the place. That's hopefully you found the same way, that covering sports in Albany, you got a taste of everything, which in some ways makes this market so unique.
It's really cool. It's funny because when you come into a market that we call it a mid-range market, right? Market 58, 57, 59, whatever it is right now. I didn't think that this was going to be my last stop. And there's a lot of reasons why it was, but one of them was that I ended up enjoying it a lot more for reasons that you just said. There's such a wide variety of things to cover. Funny story. My first day at Fox 23, I was talking to Rich, and the subject of interns came up for some reason. And he was talking about how they accept just about any intern that wants to come and work with them and help them out, but only if they didn't take Travers Day off. They had to work on Travers Day. And my first thought in my head was, what the hell is Travers Day? I had no idea, but I knew better than to ask. I was like, you know what? There's something called Google. I'm going to go on. I'm going to figure it out because it's a really big deal here. So I need to figure out what's a really big deal. And I was like, oh, horse racing, Saratoga. I don't even think I knew at the time that there was a Saratoga in town. And here I am, my first day. And now, 10 years later, I feel like maybe I'm not an expert, but I'm pretty damn close. I know a lot about horse racing. I know all the major players, and you just have to be a sponge soaking it all up. But that was what's fun for me. I'm a bit of a nerd. I love to learn. I love to get myself into new things. And so being in a market like this was awesome.
Yes. Finding out things you don't know, that thirst to find something out is always driving people. I'd love to hear that you have that same thought. We're going to talk about the career change, but I feel like even in television news in particular, in television sports, it always feels like COVID has had a different impact on people's careers. That 2020 window, for you, the challenges of how that presented, did it make you view your career differently? That window, if we're talking 2022, early 2021.
No, I actually was really proud of the way that my department handled it. We were the only station, I think, in the entire capital region that maintained its entire sports department, which was 3 people at the time, working fully 100% sports. So we didn't really switch to news. We put on a full sports cast every single night. And you think, how do you do that when there's no sports going on? And it was really challenging. We had to dig. We had to find things that were going on in the capital region, or things that we could highlight from, this on this day 5 years ago, or revisit, or, we had to get creative. And it was a major challenge because there are 2 kinds of days that you go into work. Some days, at least doing what I did, some days they are go, so busy, and they're stressful trying to get to 3 or 4 or 5 different things and turn it around and put it all on TV. And then there are some days where you go where there's nothing going on and you still have to put a sportscast on the air. Those days are harder. Those days are so much harder than the days where you have content, you just need to do it. And so the way in which we were able to fill our sportscast at the time made me extremely proud. I think that at the time, Katya, Guillaume, and Michael Barth were my 2 colleagues, and they pushed themselves really hard. And there were still things that were happening as far as updates and stuff within COVID. But at the time, we were considered essential, right? So for me, COVID didn't affect me all that much because it was work as usual. The only things that really changed for me was if we took a meeting out, we did Zoom meetings, I guess, instead of in-person meetings for our morning meetings or afternoon meetings for the station. And when my daughter was home, who was 18 months old at the time, that was a pain in the ass because sorry about that, but
she's going to listen back to this years from now and be like, Mom.
She there's no reasoning with an 18-month-old. They're just going to scream, and you're going to figure that out, guys. So yeah, when she wanted my attention, she wanted my attention. And so it was hard to be like, honey, not right now. So that was it. And I was lucky that I didn't have a toddler at the time or a school-aged kid at the time that I also had to help get through school, like a curriculum. At least I didn't have that. I just had to make sure she was taken care of. And my husband and I, working separate schedules, we were able to manage that, even though my daughter was out of daycare, because he worked a more traditional schedule. I worked more in the evenings, and we just kind of figured out that middle ground. So it didn't change things much for me, to be honest with you.
To offer, again, this time period, we're talking at Liana Bonavita, as you can see here on our visual side and audio side. I say that because Liana's last day in the sports anchor role was Friday. We're taping this on a Tuesday night. So the wound is maybe fresh, but I don't even know if I want to use the term wound or whatever, like the cut, whatever, because it's maybe not, because you've had weeks to prepare. Let's go for the easy question first. Let's talk about the career change. Why have you decided to shift your career now going forward?
I think one of that question will lead into the other ones pretty seamlessly. So for me, this is a conversation that I've been having with my husband since my daughter was born. So 3.5 years ago. So it's not a new conversation. It was not a conversation or I was ready to make an act on. I wasn't ready to act on it until recently. But I had been considering, well, all right, I work nights. What does that look like when you have a baby? And then what does that look like when you have a toddler? And then what does that look like when you have a kid in elementary school and then high school? And I had seen a lot of my former colleagues get out of the business because they had felt like they were missing time with their family. Now, mind you, looking back on those at that time, when I was in those stages of my life where I didn't have children and I saw those people do that, I always viewed them with a bit of like, ooh, you can't hack it. You can't be Superwoman. You can't do it all. And I'm going to. I'm going to be able to have my dream, chase my dream, and have my family at the same time. And you just watch, because I work too hard not to be able to do this. I want this too bad. I'm too passionate about this to give up on it. And then life happens, and you realize that that's an immature way of viewing things, because really you can't be in two places at once. And so you have to start making choices and decisions as to what your biggest priorities are. And so for me, when my daughter was really young, it was tough, but it wasn't as tough as when she got a little older. And then I had my son. And so now we have two. And the best part about this is, like, not once did my husband complain about having to deal with pickup from daycare, dinner time, bath time, bedtime, all of that stuff by himself, single-handedly. Not once did he pressure me to leave my job. He knew how much I loved it. And so I think because of that, I was able to have this whole decision-making process to myself. I was able to really reflect and figure out what it is that I wanted. And it took me some time. I mean, at the beginning, like I said, I thought about it. My daughter was born, and I thought, listen, if at some point I'm going to want to get out, if at some point I'm going to want to be at her games and not miss that stuff, is now the right time? Is now the right time for me to leave while I'm still young and I can reinvent myself? Or do I still hold on to what I love for a little while longer, while it's not as big of a deal, while they don't have homework at night that they need help on, while they don't need to be driven from here to here, and one kid this place and the other kid this place? And my original answer to that was, no, it's not time yet. I signed another contract. I signed a 3-year contract when she was young. And then I had my son, and I had to start really reevaluating again, because it was hard. I mean, my colleagues saw me struggle from time to time. They knew with the FaceTimes that I had with my kids almost every night. You know, they enjoyed them. They talked to my daughter while she was having her dinner, and she would stare at them even though she asked to talk to my friends. And then they would say, "Hi, Sienna," and she would just stare at them. but then she would, then she would cry when I would get off the phone, and "Mama, I miss you," and all of those things. And it just wasn't worth it for me anymore, to be honest with you. So I think that was the major driving factor behind me leaving. And then the question always became, well, what next? Because this is all I've ever wanted to do, and I'm doing it, and I feel like I'm pretty good at it, and I'm well suited for it. So how do you pivot? Where do you go? And I think that was a place that I got stuck a lot, because there's the natural tendency for people to leave the news industry and go directly into either PR or marketing, because let me tell you, it makes a lot of sense. Our skills are extremely transferable into that side. So it's just the opposite side, right? We deal with a lot of those people, but from the TV side, now you go to the other side. And for whatever reason, it didn't light a fire for me. And I'm a person that kind of needs to have a fire lit under me to feel like anything's worth it. I didn't want to just make a change and then be miserable all day. I didn't want to do that. And so when this opportunity came up, and your viewers probably don't know what this is, but I now work for Northwestern Mutual as a financial rep, which is very different than what I was doing before. But it was an opportunity that kind of came to me through a mutual acquaintance. And then it was something that they had to sell me on for a while, because I wasn't sure that it was right for me. But the more I learned about it, the more I realized that not only is it something I can do, but it's like the perfect fit for me, I think. So I'm excited.
Yes. How can people connect with you? I know our guy Jared's going to get mad, but that's okay. This is a judgment-free zone. How can people follow? Are we too early in the process where people can start working with you right now?
No, it's not. So I am training, but I do work with an amazing team. So right now, any kind of work that I would be doing with somebody else and learning as we go. So that's part of the process where there's no way that they would let someone that's brand new just deal with somebody by themselves and give them any kind of wrong advice. That would be a terrible business practice. So yeah, they can I mean, I still have all my same social media accounts. So Liana Bonavita on Facebook, and I think that's the same that I have on Twitter. Oh my goodness, I don't know.
No, it is. It is. All that good stuff's the same. You know what? I'll do, Leon, I'll make it easy for you. All the links will be below on our YouTube
Perfect.
and Spotify and Apple. So don't even worry about doing that.
How bad is it that 10 years into the business, I don't even know my own social media accounts? It's awful.
Things, you know what though? As usual, throughout this interview, I feel like we're on the same page constantly because you constantly keep setting me up for easy transitions and segues. You have not lost your easy TV role and everything else about setting up a host for this. Because, by the way, don't feel like you have to be holding anything back because of my background on the visual side. Because in Albany right now, the number's up to what? 19 in June of 2022. 19 on-air people have left halfway through the year. Sports in particular, I think we're up to 5 now. What do you believe is the future of television sportscast or the future of TV in general? I know that's like a big, huge question. I want you to tell me the future, but what do you see the future being?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think that the future of TV was never a factor in my personal decision to leave. I know that it was in some other people's decisions, their fears about the future of TV. I hope for the work that I've seen done that it sticks around, at least on a local kind of level, because locally, I think we do really good work, but I do think that the industry needs to change. I think that it needs to value its talent a little bit more. I don't mean just, anchors. I mean, everyone that kind of puts it all together. It's a really tough industry to live in. And I don't think a lot of people understand that, given that it's TV and glamorous, but it's not behind the scenes. So I do think that there need to be some changes that are made there to make sure that the people that we get inside of our doors are people that can do the job well, because it's a really important job to deliver. I know I'm in sports, so it's not life or death all the time, but I do think that we serve a purpose in sports, but I also think that the news side of it, the weather side of it, it can be. And I think it's really important for people to be informed on a daily basis. So what do I think the future is? That's too highbrow for me, but I hope that it survives. Given the people that I've left behind at News 10, they are far too talented to not have their voices heard and to not have their stories told.
All right, I'm going to twist it a little bit on this one. Maybe it's a younger USC student. Maybe it's someone here in the capital region, upstate New York, New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, wherever. They want to be a sports reporter. I know you're in a new role now, but maybe I'll ask you the same question a year from now too. Best advice for a young student who's graduating college to get where you had done the last 10 years to be a sports reporter?
I have lots of pieces of advice.
I like that.
Ask yourself the tough question, why are you doing it? Because if you're doing it to be on TV, don't. You're never going to make it. You will not survive. It is a tough business. You don't get paid a lot. You work crap hours. And so if you're doing it for the glory, you're never going to survive. So if you do it because you enjoy the aspect of storytelling, of giving viewers, the service that they need as far as being informed, then okay, that's first and foremost. Number 2, work hard. I mean, I know that we were talking about that's how I made it, so maybe I'm biased in that regard, but I think that it will always be noticed how hard you work and how willing you are to go the extra mile. Not feel entitled that you deserve to be where you are. No, you earn where you are always. 3. The internships, just get as much experience as you can. Don't be afraid to, at your internships that you're at, ask to do things. So that was the thing that, I interned in Boston, I interned in Los Angeles, and at various times of my college career, I had more confidence than others. And so they would have been happy letting me sit in there and log a Red Sox game the entire time, until I said, hey, can I go to a Red Sox game with your reporter? And they were like, sure. Why not? And so you learn, but you can't be afraid to ask. And so ask a lot of questions. It's what we do as reporters anyway. Take notes. And I think that those are my 3 major pieces of advice. And then, yeah, just don't be afraid to apply everywhere and anywhere that you can. Get in front of a microphone as much as you can, because I think the hardest thing that we have, and guys, you would probably agree with this, they put a mic in front of your face and a camera on you and they say, be yourself, act natural. And it's the least natural thing for most people, because who is in that position ever, So the more you can do it, the more practice you can get at it, the better you'll be.
I usually end every conversation with that question, but I like doing this now when people move away from sports to a new role. Are you officially retired from sports? Can I beg you to do a podcast? Are you done? Can we get you? Come on. We got you for 10 years. You're not just going to walk away, are you?
So I love sports, and my involvement in it, I think, will depend a lot on how much time it will take away from my kids, right? Okay. So I've already been asked, like, oh, will you be a PA announcer here or do play-by-play here? And I don't know if I'll commit my weekends every weekend. Like, this is the reason why I made the whole change, right? So a podcast here or there, sure. I mean, I love this stuff. This has never been something that I fell out of love with. That's never been why I made the change. So any reason to stay in would be great. And I'll leave it at that.
That's good. You love sports. You love working in sports, but you just love something more now in your life. And that's your family and your husband. Yeah. Good stuff, Liana Bonavita. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate you so much. I cannot wait to see you again very soon.
We will. We'll have to find a reason.
All right, Liana, thank you so much. I'll talk to you again soon. Good luck on the new adventure.